So in order to explain to you how to write an essay by telling you about my first date with my husband, I have to set the stage. So I have to tell you guys the story, okay? So, I've been married to my husband for 13 and a half years. He's a great guy. He really is. He's a wonderful father, and he loves me a lot. He really loves me a lot, and that's nice. It helps. And for 13 and a half years, it has been a very interesting roller coaster of a life, but it's worth it, okay? Now, however, our marriage almost never happened. Our family almost never happened because we went on our first date and it was horrible, guys. Our first date was not good. It was one of those, like, was gonna go into my memory as one of the worst dates of my life. And so luckily my husband was able to turn it around. Okay. So what happened is that, we got married when I was 25. So I met him when I was 24. And I was a single mom. My daughter was 5, and I had just gotten my teaching credential. I had been a teacher for 1 year. I had subbed for 1 year, and I was at Hillview, and I was planning my life, and my life did not have anything to do with dating anymore. I was like, I'm done with dating. I'm just going to focus on my daughter. I'm going to focus on my career, and life's going to be okay. So that summer, I got my daughter into swim lessons, okay? And I walked onto the pool deck, and I met Coach Dave. All right. Coach Dave was not my type. Coach Dave was a little bit older than me. And again, I was not interested in dating. Okay. And so, but throughout the summer, I got to know Coach Dave, and he was a really good guy, and he really liked kids. And honestly, he was just a good guy. And so at the end of summer, he asked me out. And everyone's like, yeah, go out with him. And I'm like, but I don't want to. I'm not in the mood to date. And they said, well, just go out with him anyway. And I said, okay. So I went out with him. And he showed up in closed-toed shoes, tight dress jeans with a belt, and a buttoned up black dress shirt. Okay? And I'd only ever seen this guy in flip-flops and board shorts and a t-shirt because he was the swim coach, right? So he shows up and he looks so uncomfortable. And he shows up to take me on the date, and he takes me to the Orange Circle, where he is not familiar. He's from Huntington Beach. Of course, Sari, yeah, by all means, if you guys need to go out for a second, that's why I'm recording it, so you can come back if you miss anything, okay? All right, so he takes me to the Orange Circle. He's from Huntington Beach, so he's very uncomfortable in that neighborhood anyway. He was taking me to a restaurant that someone had suggested he take me to, okay? So the restaurant ended up being closed on a Sunday evening because he hadn't called to make reservations, okay? First strike in my book. I was hangry already because it was a Sunday evening, and I was like, well, you're taking me out to dinner, and it was an early dinner. I'm pretty sure we were supposed to go to dinner at like 5 o'clock, okay? So he'd come to get me. We're at the Orange Circle at 5, and we realize that the restaurant is closed. It's not open on Sundays. So then we find this little Italian restaurant, and he orders a Coke. I order a Diet Coke, and we get the food, and it's these teeny tiny portions. And I'm like, okay. So the conversation does not go well. I'm hangry. I'm annoyed that the restaurant was closed that he wanted me to take me to. And he asked me a question like, so do you play any sports? And I'm like, no, I'm not really athletic. And like the conversation just kind of died. Okay? And then he's like, oh, okay, so if you don't play sports, like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm really into my faith. I really like going to church and singing in the choir and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, okay. Because his idea was of going to church was like surfing. He did go to church with his mom every once in a while, but it wasn't like that was something he was really into. So the point, guys, is that the date was going bad. Our conversation was not going well. I was still hungry. And the portion was so small, and our date was pretty much over. And the conversation had died, like every time we tried to get it started. And I'm at this point thinking to myself, okay, he can get me home by 6. Like, if we finish this up, he can get me home, and you know, and I can still salvage the rest of this night. I can put my daughter to sleep and relax tonight before I go to work the next day. And so I'm like ready to go. And he says, as we're walking to the truck, there's the place in the back. I wasn't really being rude. He didn't think it was going well either. Okay. And yeah, and I was still hangry. I wanted more food, right? And so he was very polite. He paid for the dinner. And then he asks if I wanted gelato. In the back of the Italian restaurant, they were selling gelato. Gelato is Italian ice cream, and it's really thick. And gelato is either something people either love or they hate. I hate gelato, okay? However, like Jonathan says, I didn't want to be rude, and he had paid for dinner, and he's this nice guy that I've known now for a few months. And so I say, sure, let's get some gelato. So we go and get gelato, and we go and sit on a bench in the orange circle. And my kids now call it the love bench because they know this story. Okay, so we go and we sit on the bench at the orange circle that's still there, and we're eating our gelato. And I can literally see his truck, and I'm thinking to myself, as soon as we're done with the gelato, you know, we're done. And then he tries again. And I was actually, you know, I'm like, that's really nice that he's trying to get the conversation started again. So he goes about it a different direction. So instead of saying, do you play any sports? He says, so do you like sports? Are there any sports you enjoy? And I said, well, I love football. And he's like, oh, you love football. Okay, what about football do you love? And I said, well, I love college football. I really love watching college football, but my team is Notre Dame. I mean, like, if Notre Dame's playing, I'm watching. And he goes, no way. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I'm a Notre Dame fan. And I'm like, no, you're not. How did we not know this? How did you not bring this up, right? He goes, no, I'm a huge Notre Dame fan. And he mentioned very briefly that his dad went to Notre Dame. And I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. Oh my gosh. Well, so we realized that we had something in common, okay? But here's the thing, guys. If he had continued to talk about Notre Dame, and that was all we talked about was football, the conversation would have died, all right? So luckily, the guy was smart, and he didn't continue on with that one topic. He's like, oh, wow, we have something in common. That's like a major thing in common. And I'm like, yeah, that is a major thing in common. So then he says, well, are there any other sports you enjoy? You know, like, do you like soccer? What do you like? And I said, well, if I'm going to, there really aren't many other sports I enjoy watching, but you know what I'll watch? I'll sit down and I'll watch the Dodgers. I love watching the Dodgers. He's like, what? You're a Dodger fan? I go, yeah, I'm a Dodger fan. True blue, baby. By the way, we won last night. We're going to the World Series. Woo! Yes, Jonathan, I know, right? Okay. Good, Christopher. You should be taking notes. This is one of the reasons I share this with people, okay? All right, so again, we're like, oh my gosh, we have this in common. Whoa, okay. And like someone said, oh, he was lying. Because seriously, guys, the concept of finding a Notre Dame fan who's also a Dodgers fan in Southern California is very minuscule. So at this point, we're like, whoa, we actually got some, like, those are two pretty big things in common. However, if all we had in common was the fact that we like Notre Dame and we like the Dodgers, that's really not enough to build on a relationship, okay? So somehow, luckily, he doesn't continue going on and on about the Dodgers. He kind of is like, so why do you like Notre Dame and the Dodgers? Like, it's very rare that combination comes up. And I say, yeah, I know. And I said, well, I like Notre Dame because, you know, the Irish Catholic thing, and I was raised Catholic, And my grandpa, who I was really close to, was Irish. So the whole idea of the Irish Catholic thing, like that's one of the reasons I love Notre Dame. And I love the Dodgers because it was something I shared with my dad. I remember watching the Dodgers with my dad. And he's like, oh my gosh, I watched the Dodgers with my dad. That's how I became a fan. And I am Irish Catholic. Like my family is Irish Catholic. And I'm the youngest of 9. And I'm like, no, you're not. That's so cool. Like I honestly never realized he had that many brothers and sisters. And so I told him, I'm an only child, but I was adopted and I've always wanted a big family. And I'm like, tell me more about your family. So it was this open-ended situation. And he goes, well, I'd love to tell you more about my family. I'd love to keep talking to you. But you said you were ready to go home. Like, what do you want me to do? Like, I'll take you home, no problem. But I'd really love to keep talking to you. And I'm like, I do too. Do you want to go, like, get some food? Because I'm still hungry. And he goes, yeah, I totally will go and let's find some food. And he goes, but I don't know this area very well. And I said, well, this is the Orange Circle, and I went to college down at Chapman for 1 year, so I know this area really well. And I said, there's this place called O's, like, right down the street. Do you want to go and go to O's? And we can get, and O's is like a restaurant bar. It's like an Irish hangout place. And I said, we can get some pub food and keep talking. And he's like, okay, let's go to O's. Take me to O's. So we moved to O's. And that is where the essay really begins. Okay? All right.